Welcome back. In the last video, we looked at conditional elements and widgets. There are really only a few more features that I want to talk about, but before I get to them, we should really take a moment to talk about the page building function and what it really is. Call it the theoretical portion of the course, if you will. This will be a lot easier now that I've already shown you a few examples. There are three different types of page building functions: elements, attributes, and widgets. All of these functions can be accessed from the .html page building object. Dot itself is a page building object, and all of the functions, whether it's an element, attribute, or widget, return an instance of the page building object. Now, if a target was specified using dot as a function, the page building functions will render directly to that target. Otherwise, they'll be rendered to a virtual element. The page building functions can accept parameters. For example, the parameter passed into an element builder defines the contents of that element. Element builders are pretty versatile, and we've already seen a few examples. They can accept strings, which get rendered into raw HTML. They can accept dot markup. They can also be recursive in that they can accept a function, and whatever the return value is of the function will be rendered as markup. And I also mentioned before that you can pass an array into a .html element builder, and the array will be joint. You know what, let's just do that as an example. All right, so let's add a new example here. And in this example, we'll return an unordered list. And the unordered list will accept an array of list items. Now we could specify the list items by just typing in dot.li list item 1, comma, dot.li. And by the way, you can just pass in integers, and of course they render as strings. They don't have any special function. And really you can pass in even strings here and do something like this. Right, and that'll actually render as a list item in this UL. And just to be complete, we'll do the other example, and I'll prove to you that this works. You could have a function that returns a dot.li. Okay, and let's test this out. Well, there you go. Now the reason that that's showing up as an actual list item is because I'm not escaping the HTML before putting it into the pre-element. In fact, why don't we go ahead and fix that? T is very similar to the .html h function in that it prints out HTML, only it will escape the text. We'll give this a go. And there you go. The last thing I want to say about element building functions is that suppose that in the future HTML gets updated and it has some tags that I don't support, then, well, I promise that I'll come back and I'll update the library to include those, but you could always use the dot.el function to add your own custom tags. You know, in theory, you could even use that to build custom elements because it just accepts two parameters. The first parameter is the name of the element or the name of the tag, and the second parameter is the contents of the tag. Oh, and don't forget that there's two element building functions that just render plain text. There's the h function, which renders markup, that renders as HTML, and there's the t function that escapes HTML characters and prints escaped text. Attribute building functions are a lot simpler. We've already covered them. Just as a recap, there's two different types of parameters they can accept. They can either accept strings or anything that can evaluate to a string, such as a number, which will be counted as a string, or they can accept a function which will be assigned an arbitrary name, and that's really only used for events like on-click event attributes and things like that. If you don't set a value for the attribute, the value of the attribute will be set to the name of the attribute. This is common practice for attributes that don't typically have a value, like required or disabled. In fact, the value of those attributes is arbitrary. In case you ever want to use an attribute name that doesn't exist in the HTML language for whatever reason, you can use the attr function. The first parameter accepts is the name of the attribute, and the second parameter it takes is the value. Widgets are the third type of .html page building function, and what they do is just run code and sometimes they'll add elements or sometimes they'll add attributes, but typically they're used to execute some type of more complex behavior. And I've already shown you the example of a custom widget as well as conditional elements, and now we're going to get to even more. So the next example I want to show you is the ability to create iterative elements. So let's create our example widget, and I have that in the clipboard to save time. And there are two iterative functions that I'm going to show you. The first is iterate and the second is each. Let's go ahead and add an iterate function here and I'll describe what it does. Iterate takes two parameters. The first parameter is the number to iterate to, and this is going to be an iterator that goes from 0 to this number. So let's pick a number. Let's say 5. So the number will be 0 through 4 inclusive. And then the second parameter has to be a function. And the function accepts a parameter for the current number that's being iterated. So the function is going to get called once per iteration, and of course the return value of this function can be any type of string or dot markup, and that'll get concatenated together the same way that I showed you that arrays will get joined together. So this example as is should print out the numbers between 0 and 5, not including the 5. Let's give it a try. Oh, hang on. It looks like I forgot to include the return here. There we go. The second iterative element is each. So let's do an example of that. The each function accepts two parameters. The first parameter has to be an array, and the second is again a function that gets called once for each array element and passes in the current element as a parameter. So we will set this up. Let's create an array. We'll just choose some values: apple, banana, orange. We'll accept the element in as a parameter. And just so that you can see how useful this is, let's put this inside of an ordered list. So we'll do that, and I think I need to put it there. Okay, and just for formatting reasons. Okay, and just like we did with the iterate function, the return value of each will be concatenated together inside of this OL here. So let's do that. Return dot.li element. I remember my return statement, so let's give this a go. And there you have it. The next example is going to be timed elements. So I'm going to show you timed elements, and then we're going to do a little exercise. So again, we'll create our example. So timed elements are implemented using the wait function. Wait accepts two parameters. The first parameter is the number of milliseconds to wait, and the second parameter is the .html callback function that returns markup to render. So let's build a little program here that waits 1 second and then prints out some text. 1000 milliseconds, and there's your callback. And let's just return a span. And I'm going to click it in 3, 2, 1. And there you go. Now, in case you're wondering how this works, and you should be wondering how it works, basically what it does is it creates a temporary element, and then that temporary element gets replaced by whatever is inside of the wait callback. In fact, you can see that on the current .html website here. There's an example right on the page here for timed markup, and it uses a similar example framework to the one we're building. And if you click Run Example, you can actually see the effect of this. The HTML that gets rendered here is a custom HTML element. Now, these custom elements are supported by the spec. I've read that most browsers implement these custom undefined elements sort of like an empty span. But yeah, they're supported and they don't take up any space or anything like that. But that's the way they work, in case you're wondering, and they'll never be rendered out of order, even if you have different weights returning at different lengths of time. And of course, when I say they get replaced, what I mean is they get removed from the document altogether. So the function cleans up after itself. So look, we're running out of time, but there's two more exercises I want to do in this video. The first thing is I want to talk about jQuery wrappers. If you go on the .html website, there's a bunch of jQuery functions which are supported by .html. And the way that you reference them within .html is you just put the $sign in front of the functions. So here are a bunch of transition functions, and you can see an example of a transition function being used down below. And these transitions are used just the same as an attribute. So they'll cascade down into the last element. So in this case, an animate is going to target this div after a wait. And you can see an example here of this running. So after 1 second, this div gets animated to 200 pixels. It's the same with all of these event functions. The event gets assigned to the last element that was created, and all of the parameters of all of these functions work exactly the same as they would work in jQuery. So they're in the same order. Basically, I just pass the parameter list into jQuery. But don't forget to precede the name of all these functions with $sign. The only difference is I tried to make it so that if there's an onDone callback function passed in as a parameter, and that onDone callback function returns dot markup, it will actually render to your page the same as a wait timeout. But that's the only thing I'm going to say about jQuery wrappers. jQuery is not a dependency, but if you do have jQuery loaded when you load .html, these functions will be supported. So let's do a final assignment that compiles all of the knowledge we just gained. Let's create a widget that accepts an array of elements and then prints the elements in an ordered list, one at a time at 1 second intervals. You should pause the video right now and go try this yourself. Here's the solution. So just add the widget to the top of your code. And then we'll accept it. Function that has an array parameter. And then we're going to return a ordered list. And the ordered list will have dot.each array. So we're going to loop through the array, and for each element, we are going to return a dot.list item for that element. Oh, and actually I forgot the timeout, so technically that's not true. We're going to return a dot.wait first, and then 1 second timeout, and then a callback, and this is going to be in here. All right, the only thing is that 1000 is actually going to apply to all the internal elements, so we need a variable out here for a multiplier. We'll just call it m, and then inside of here we'll increment m and 1000 times m. So that was pretty easy, right? And to test this out, we'll just create a new example down here. Hey, we'll just copy this list up here to save time. And that's all there is to it. Feel free to contact me with any questions you might have. I'm going to be posting this tutorial project on GitHub, and there'll be a link in the video description. And of course, you can also access the .html website through a link in the video description. Thanks for watching and giving .html a try. Be sure to share the love, and while you're here, subscribe for more Josh Sideris.